Hey guys, it's Casey and welcome back to my channel. So I was not planning on making this video today. I really wasn't. I was instead going to tell you all a charming little story about the time that one of our part-timers got his eye pecked out by a magpie. Fun little story. Festive, very on brand. Classic wildlife. Happens a lot more than you would think. And while my audience on this channel seems to thrive on emotional devastation and gory details and the poetic justice of wildlife getting one over on man, while I was filming this video, in the middle of filming the video, it reminded me of something a little less fun, something a little too real. More specifically, I was about 5 minutes into filming the video that I wanted to film initially, and I was discussing how a collective noun for crows is a murder of crows, while the collective noun for magpies is a tiding, and how it should be switched because crows are our friends, and magpies commit homicide. You know, murder, unaliving, in cold blood, whatever you want to call it. And then, for some reason, that led me on a tangent about people murder, and that is how I ended up here filming this video instead of the original video. Because I've never actually sat down and filmed a video explaining what happened to my coworker Tegan, who got murdered at the hospital back in 2021. And I was never going to. I was never planning to. I mean, I had a couple of times sat down and started filming a video because I had mentioned it several times in passing in other videos and people had asked questions. But every time I'd get about halfway through and I would just be like, no, like this is going to get me into trouble in real life. But I'm already off on the tangent today. I'm already invested. So let's just do it while the going is hot. But first, before we dive too deeply into eating the trauma stew, let me just tell you a little bit about Tegan herself, the girl who got murdered. Not for justice reasons, that ship sailed a long time ago. Just because in this specific story, context is important. Tegan was 19, so practically a fetus in our town's terms, and she was fresh out of high school, freshly graduated, and she was one of those rare individuals who genuinely wanted to do something good with their lives. And she could have. She was smart. She was a very smart girl. She was probably, honestly, too smart for her own good because she noticed things that in our shitty town you probably shouldn't notice if you want to live to be, you know, old and boring. So she worked part-time at the hospital, like 3, maybe 4 days a week. If someone else's shift needed to be covered, she'd pick it up. Like, she was here a lot. And she was a jack of all trades, a Jill of all trades. So she would work in the clinic, or she'd work in the pharmacy, or she would do paperwork, really whatever needed to be done on any given day, she would do it. And she would do it without question, and she would do it without argument. So she was a really good employee. She hadn't been working at the hospital for a very long time, but, like, it wasn't a long tenure, but she had passed the clinic's infamous 90-day probation period, which is kind of like the real-life equivalent of getting to level 2 in Dark Souls without dying, which is a nice way of saying that it is a very rare feat. Tegan was also a local, which in itself was really rare because the vast majority of our part-timers are backpackers who have kind of been tricked into working here as part of their rural placement requirement set by the government, which in layman's terms basically means that they arrive here hoping to seek out an authentic outback experience and they end up leaving with nothing but heat stroke and psychological scarring. But Tegan, she was born in this shithole, she was raised here, and for reasons that include familiar obligations and cosmic cruelty, she couldn't leave. So if this is your first time watching my videos, hello, you should probably know for your reference that the town that I live in, really the town that I'm forced to live in. In fact, even calling it a town is too charitable, let's just call it what it really is. The shithole is the kind of place where for fun in the summer, kids go swimming in amoeba-infested waters, and for fun in winter, they do meth. It's the kind of place where women wear sequined miniskirts to funerals and call it culture. Anybody who can leave does leave, like at their earliest convenience, and they never come back. Now, Tegan, she didn't leave. She absolutely had the potential to leave. She just literally couldn't leave. Her dad had died of cancer a few years prior to the story taking place, and her mother had just completely had a meltdown after that and ended up being sanctioned or institutionalized, or pick whatever word makes you feel better about the state locking people away to rot out of sight, out of mind. And like I said earlier, Tegan, like anyone else in this town whose brain cells have not been melted by illicit substances or, to be frank, incest, she absolutely could have run off to Melbourne or Sydney or anywhere else that didn't serve deep-fried kangaroo tail as a delicacy, yet she had to stay behind. I guess she didn't have to, but she chose to stay behind to take care of her little brother, which for purely selfish reasons, I didn't mind because I quite liked her and I don't like anyone in this town. I mean, let's be honest, I don't like anybody who is not Nate or Ash in this time and place, full stop. So that's not surprising, but I did actually quite like her. And she had an energy about her. She was one of those people who really bright and irritatingly happy people who make you feel uncomfortable just existing in the same space as them. And that's why if I could have, I would have fired her right on the spot without hesitation. Because people like Tegan do not survive towns like this. And our hospital is the worst place of them all. Our hospital has a really bad tendency to chew people up, decent people up, and spit them out into a metaphorical, spiritual meat grinder. Now, she's the one who actually trained Nate while I was out with my arm being broken, and I do not think that should be held against her. She did the very best job she could with the task she was given. And the two of them, Nate and Tegan, they really started hitting it off and they became friends and they started spending time together outside of work. Like, not romantically because she had a boyfriend and Nate is gayer than RuPaul riding unicorn down San Francisco during Pride Week, but they became friends, so they started hanging out outside of work. And on weekends when Nate had no work for the entire weekend and Tegan wasn't doing anything with her boyfriend or her other friends, which was a very rare occasion. You know, this wasn't happening every other weekend or whatever. It was a very rare occasion. They would decide to drive out to the city for the entire weekend and they would get a hotel room and they would go to dinner and they would go to a movie and eat overpriced popcorn and just do normal friend things. There was nothing strange about it. There was nothing suspicious about it. There was nothing malicious about it. It was just normal friend things. Often they would, well, pretty much all the time, they would invite me along to come. But even though Nate is like my ultimate ride or die, I never went because I knew that they were only inviting me along to be polite and I didn't want to ruin their fun. Anyway, enough about Tegan and on to the actual story. A day came. It was in August and she just did not show up for work. She did not text, she did not call, she did not send an email, she did not send a carrier pigeon, she just didn't come and we never heard from her again. And I was not concerned about this because this was not unusual behavior. I mean, it was for Tegan, but like I said earlier, this place has a real tendency to chew up part-timers like it's a blender. So I see this kind of thing all the time. Like, people quit without notice all the time. Sometimes, like, they would just disappear into the night. They would not even stick around long enough to pick up their last paycheck. They would just get on a bus or get into someone's car, or some of them even, like, just started walking out of town. Like, I don't know where they think they were going, but they would do it, and they're grown adults with agency, so what can we do about it? And we would never see or hear from them again. And I figured that's just what happened with Tegan. Like, her brother was now at an age, he was like 15, so he was old enough to now cook his own ramen, so she just decided to get out of Dodge. And I, for one, I was not concerned. I was just really happy to see her go. Not as an employee, because she was a really good employee, I would have liked to keep her around, but as a woman, as someone who liked her as a person, I was really happy to see her get out of this shithole and, you know, hopefully go get some education or travel the world or just do something that wasn't sitting getting high. Like, I was happy to see her go, like, go girl. However, what did concern me is that when I told Nate that she had disappeared and she was gone and I didn't think she was coming back, he didn't seem to care. And I found that really weird, considering the fact that they had grown to become really close friends. And I remember when I first told him, he just kind of shrugged and said some kind of offhand joke about how everybody's disappearing, we're just doing it at different rates. And then he went back to restocking the supply cart, and that was the last time that we ever spoke about it, until the police showed up. So apparently, according to her brother, Tegan had left the house in the middle of the night, barefoot and phoneless, and she had wandered off down the street. And in this town, that is the same thing as putting a bullseye on your back that says murder me, and seemingly someone took that as gospel because that was the last time anyone ever saw her. And so the town did what small towns do best, especially this shithole. It gossiped and it blamed. So first came the rumors, and shortly after that came the masked men. So they showed up at the clinic one night. They were wearing balaclavas and they had guns in their hand. They did not shoot. They did not come inside. They just spray painted the word killer across the door and left. It was all very Banksy. Now, did I think that Nate killed her at the time? No, I did not. Did everyone else think that? Absolutely. Was I concerned? Not really, because as unhinged as Nate objectively was, and still is to this day, he is not and was not the type to hide a body. Like, especially, he was not the type to hide a body so well that no one had any clue where it was weeks and weeks later. Because you've got to keep in mind that when I first met Nate back in 2019, 2020, 2019, 2020, it was 2020, I'm pretty sure. When I first met Nate back in 2020, he was a fully confirmed out and proud member of the murder cult that had its compound on one of the old cattle stations on the outskirts of our town. No, sorry. I need to rephrase that. He was a member of the murder religion that had its compound on the outskirts of our town. Because it's been 5 years since death did they part, and Nate, to this day, still gets highly offended if we refer to it as a cult. So, instead, Nate was a fully fledged member of the murder religion that had its compound on the outskirts of our town. So, it was a murder religion. Happy. Point is that all of that was extracurricular, and if he had killed her, he would have given an entire TED talk on it. At least he would have told me about it, probably while eating chips. Because he's very weird, but he's not deceitful. Like, even back then, I fully trusted that if I asked him a direct question, he would give me an honest answer about it. But Tegan, she was still missing, and everyone was saying that she was dead, thinking that she was dead except for me. Because at this point in time, I was under the assumption that she had just come to her senses and run away. So flash forward, and it's been about 2-ish months since Tegan left, and to be honest, it's going to sound terrible, I have more or less completely forgotten about her by this point. Like, we have gone through a couple of part-timers since she's been gone, so she is out of my mind. I'm hoping she's doing well, but she's not on my radar anymore. She's gone, and I have accepted that. I have made peace with that. But 2 months later, I am working night shift alone at the clinic, and it is a very, very quiet night, like unusually abnormally quiet. By some miracle, I have managed to read an entire book without a single person interrupting me seeking painkillers or a pregnancy test or whatever other beautiful disaster the locals like to drag through my door at midnight. And this is suspicious because we're the only place open 24/7 in about 150-mile radius. Like, even our petrol station, our local petrol station, closes at 9 p.m. and does not open at all on Sundays. Because we're not just a hospital. Like, we are a hospital, but we're also a cafe and a pharmacist, and we sell alcohol and cigarettes. And do not ask me the morality of the hospital selling alcohol and cigarettes, but we do. And we also have a pokies machine down the hallway, which should tell you something about the kind of place that we live. But the point is that we are always busy at night, unless there is a very, very good reason for us not to be. So I know that this is not normal. This is not normal behavior for our locals. Our hospital is always super busy at night, sometimes even busier at night than it is during the day. So I decided that I'm going to get up and I'm going to go outside to the car park, the parking lot, to see, is it a chemical spill? Is it a bushfire? Is it a flood? Is it a zombie apocalypse? Like, what is going on? Where are all the people? What is stopping them from coming in? So the very first thing that I see when I walk outside the door is that someone has posted a sign on the door, like with sticky tape and just normal lined paper. And the sign reads, "Hospital closed for repairs." And I just remember standing there looking at it like, the owner of the clinic, he has officially lost his goddamn mind, because we are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and sometimes longer. In the 6 years I've worked here, the 6 years today time, 2025 time, the clinic, the hospital, it is only ever closed when we are being court mandated to close. Like, a judge has ordered us to close our doors, and even when that has happened, the owner, he's been chomping at the bit to reopen the second that it is legally allowed to. So we never close. If there are repairs, they just repair around us. And my second thought was, this is really strange, because I just walked through these doors 2 hours ago and there was no sign there at that time, and there is no one else on the premises at the moment other than me. But whatever, I just figure at this point, I'm a very trusting person, so I just figured that the owner, he's hired a new cleaning person and I haven't been informed about it yet, and the new cleaner, he obviously hasn't been informed that we never shut down ever for any reason whatsoever, unless we're legally obligated to. So I will just, hunt him down in the morning and we'll have a conversation and everything will be fine. So I rip the sign off the door and I start to turn to go back inside, and that's when I see the traffic cones. About a dozen of them forming a very neat and obnoxiously bright orange blockade across the end of the driveway. And even just from that very first brief glance that I saw, obviously at this point I turned around to look at them more fully, but even from that very first glance, I knew that it was a bit of an overkill for a new cleaner just to put out, to fix some drywall. And the placing was obviously very, very strategic to try to keep people out of the driveway and thus out of the hospital. So at this point, the little house of alarm bells in my head had lit up like a psych ward at Christmas, because at this point in time, this point in the history of the hospital, Jared was dead, Kevin was missing, not that he was much help to begin with. William, he was known to us, but he was not working with us yet. He was just coming and going like a few times a year. So we were prime real estate to be held up and robbed. And we were getting robbed all the friggin' time because for the most part, I was just there alone. Sometimes we had nurses coming from different hospitals. They were obligated to come and work with us, but it was usually just during the day. At the nighttime, we were usually alone. So we were getting robbed like once every other month. But it was okay because we had a safety plan. So I started to enact the safety plan. I went back inside very quickly and I locked the door, properly locked it with the deadbolt, not just with the button. I properly locked the door. And then I went to the landline to call Michelle, who, if, again, you don't watch my videos, she's the officer who is kind of responsible for babysitting the clinic. So I went to the landline to call her and the phone was dead, which, again, is not that unusual. As I always say, out here in the outback, phone reception is dicey on good days and non-existent on most. But I was a bit concerned, like, it wasn't normal dead. Like, usually when you pick up the phone, when it's dead, the landline, you will get a couple of, like, dial tones, and then it will just cut out, but it was just completely dead. But, again, we have a safety plan, and this is no big deal because in the safety plan, we have a plan B for exactly this reason. We have a CV radio, so I just need to go to the office and get the CV radio, like deep breath in, deep breath out, everything's fine, I'm safe, the doors are locked, I just need to go to the office, except I didn't make it that far. Because as I am walking down the hallway, and there is a giant mosquito in here, and it's really annoying me, and I want to, like, slap it, but it keeps flying away. Anyway, I'm walking down the hallway, and as I'm walking, I suddenly, right in my ear, no warning, hear this gravelly, venomous voice say,
"Night, night, bitch!"
And before I can even process it, an arm hooks around my neck and tightens like a steel cable, and I am yanked backwards like the world's saddest pinata. I come off my feet, I'm choking, I'm kicking, I'm flailing, and nothing is working. So I am being pulled backwards at this point by my hair and not my throat, thankfully, but it still hurt like a son of a... But I've got a ponytail, and whoever it is, they've got me by the ponytail and they're dragging me backwards down the hallway, past the exam rooms and the toilets and the kitchen, straight out the back door into the freezing darkness. And guess who it is? It is Drest friggin' Levesque, because of course. And again, if you're new to my channel and so unfamiliar with Drest Levesque, just imagine if John Wick and Satan had a baby and you've pretty much got Drest Levesque. Anyway, on this specific night, he looked like he had just crawled out of a magazine called Guns and Psychos Monthly. He had combat boots on and a leather jacket and dead shark eyes and the scar on his neck from when William tried to turn him into a human Pez dispenser. Oh, and he was holding a shovel. That part is very important. So he flings me onto the ground like a piece of trash, and I hit it hard, and he just stands there and laughs. He laughs like it is a sitcom, and I'm the punchline. And then the next thing he does is that he stabs the shovel into the dirt next to my ear, like, this side. And then he leans over all like menacing in teeth and he's like,
"Hey, Casey, did you miss me?"
For the record, I had not missed him. Instinctively, I try to start scooching backwards away from him a little bit, which was a huge mistake because he didn't like that very much. So he digs his boot into my chest with his full weight, and he's not a little man. He's over 6 foot tall and just built of pure muscle. So it knocks the wind out of me and I fall backwards onto my back. So I'm laying in the dirt at this point, and he stands over me and he yanks the shovel out of the dirt and he begins to swing it at my head like he's teeing off at the Psycho Open and my head is the tee. Misses by about half an inch, and he swings again and again and again. And every time he swings, I can physically feel the air in front of my face shift. And the whole time he's just standing over me still, smiling down at me like the maniac he is. And then he says to me very calmly, he says,
"Hold still, I want to see how closely I can swing it."
And he does. He swings it again, and this time I can practically feel it kissing my eyebrows. And I'm just laying there with my eyes shut, thinking, what the hell do you want? Because, and it is very important that I establish this, because if I don't, some of my actions going forward in the story is going to seem very unusual. But I knew that Drest Levesque was not going to kill me. I knew it before this moment, I knew it during this moment, and I continue to know it to this very day in 2025. He is never going to kill me. Prior to this moment, he'd had about 100 opportunities to do so, if you pleased, and since this moment, he's had about 5 or 6 more. Never taken them. He's messed me up pretty badly on several occasions. He's broken my bones. He broke my tooth. There was that one time that he threw me down the well. But he's never actually used deathly force against me, and so I wasn't really concerned, as crazy as it sounds, I wasn't concerned in this moment that he was going to unalive me. However, in saying that, him swinging a metal shovel at my face was still scary on an animalistic level. So, on reflex more than anything else, I grabbed his ankle, and I figured that maybe if I was lucky, I would be able to, like, snap it. However, all I really did was piss him off even further, and he ended up stomping down on my ribs, and I physically heard something crack. Now, I am familiar enough at this point in my life with my own internal soundtrack to know the sound of a couple of bones breaking. So at this point, I ask him, like, what do you want? Like, what is your problem today? Because with Drest, it could be anything. It could be that I parked in his favorite car park at IGA, or I was wearing his least favorite color, or maybe he was just having a moody Tuesday. Because the other thing to understand about Drest Levesque, and I've said it before and I'll say it a million times more, he is a psychopath, and I do not mean that in a derogatory way. I mean that in the most literal sense of the word, like antisocial personality disorder. So he does not have motives for his actions, he just has moods. Some days he just seems to want to make people piss themselves, while on other days he seems completely determined to unalive someone, and you don't really get a heads up about which kind of day you're walking into. So the very next thing that he does, he doesn't answer my question, he just hands me the shovel and instructs me to start digging. Not because he's had a change of heart or anything, but because he wants me to start digging my grave. The thing is, I am actually pretty good at digging graves. It's just one of those useless skills you pick up after a life like mine. So for the next 2 hours, I just moved earth with my ribs aching and my breath was ragged and my body was screaming. So the whole time that I'm doing this, Drest is watching me from a few feet away. He's perched on the back of his Mustang and he's smirking like he's posing for his profile on some kind of warlord's dating website. But eventually the grave is deep enough for whatever he needs it for, or he got bored or something, I don't know. Either way, he walks over and he yanks me out of the hole by my arm, and then he starts going off on one of his usual villain monologues.
"I don't think you understand what's going on here. Like, your time is up, Casey. There's no running out the clock this time. I'm going to kill you tonight."
And the whole time he's speaking, I'm just listening and nodding along like, yeah, sure, whatever you say, I've heard this one before, because I had 100 times over. Honestly, at this point, it was like his catchphrase. Like a psychotic Pokemon with one attack move. Drest Levesque uses homicidal threats. It's not very effective. So he finishes, and by this point, I am so over it. I'm over the whole entire thing. I am in pain, I'm cold, and honestly, I've got so much paperwork to do that I just say to him, I'm like, look, I know you're not going to kill me, and you know that you're not going to kill me. So whatever this big show is that you've got going on, can you just like hurry it up a little bit so we can go back inside? Well, I can go back inside and call the police, and you can run away like you always do. And he's loving this. He's eating this up. He's like, oh, I'm not going to kill you, am I? Are you sure about that? Are you sure? And I respond quite foolishly, looking back in hindsight. No, you're not going to kill me because you are not a murderer. And I just want to point out before we go any further, because once we continue on, this statement is just going to seem completely foolish. At this specific point in time that I said it, it was true as far as I knew. He was not a murderer. Had he killed people? Absolutely. But it was justifiable. And again, he came from a military background. So it wasn't like he was out there running around like a crazed psycho, like Ted Bundying everybody. I mean, he is a psycho, but he wasn't crazed. Like, Drest Levesque comes from the same culture that my best friend did, and I lived there for several years, so I understood the code that he was raised in, and it just didn't allow for that. So when I say this to him, he laughs, and he shoves me back into the grave, which was fine, because it wasn't that deep, so it only hurt a little. But here's the thing. I had stolen his phone before. When did I mention? I don't think I did mention, but when we're doing that whole back and forth, like, can we go back inside? You're not a murderer, like, you're not going to kill me, we both know this. Are you sure about it? Like, that kind of thing. He had tried to intimidate me by, like, coming up chest to chest with me, which is actually really scary because he's over a foot taller than me, but a good thing because I was able to pickpocket his phone, which he only has himself to blame because he knows very well that I'm shit in a fight, but the one thing that I can do is steal, so he's got no one else to blame but himself for how things turned out. But yeah, so I'd stolen his phone, and his phone is always a satellite phone, and it always works, which is amazing. Anyway, the point of me telling you this is that at this point in time, Drest disappeared from my line of view. So I took the opportunity to quickly text Michelle an SOS. Simple, elegant, life-saving. I knew for a fact that she would get it, and I trusted that she would understand that it was from me, even though she didn't have the number saved to her phone. So I'm like, okay, help is on the way, and help is on the way. And so I am laying in this half-dug grave that I've been forced to dig, barely breathing, and that is when Drest comes back, and he tosses something into the grave next to me. And I look over, and that is when I knew that the night was far worse than I had predicted, could have ever predicted, because he had tossed Tegan into the grave next to me. And she was bleeding, and she was bound, and she was gagged, and she was visibly terrified. And I'm just like, oh my god. Like, it's... And he does not even give me an opportunity to ask what the hell she's doing there. He just immediately springs into another one of his little twisted games, and he points at her, and he's like,
Hey, Tegan, did you hear that Casey doesn't think I'm a murderer? Do you think I'm a murderer? Blink once for yes, and blink twice for no.
Of course, she blinks once. Understandable. And then he's like,
do you think that either one of you are getting out of here alive?
And she blinks twice, which again is totally understandable and expected. And as you probably expect, Drest is eating this up, and so he turns back to me and he asks,
what about you? Do you still think that you're both getting out of here alive?
And I was like, yeah, of course we are, because at this point in time, you gotta remember, at this point in time, I still wholeheartedly believed that Drest Levesque was not a murderer. And he certainly was not going to murder me, of all people. And even if he did, so what? Like, I would be dead. It's not like he could have held it over my head and said that he told me so. So he disappears back to his car for about a minute, and when he returns, he's holding a different gun. And he proceeds to toss it down into the grave with me, like as a party favor. And then he says,
well, if you feel that way, I think we should play a game. If you shoot yourself, I will let her go, and if you shoot her, I'll let you go.
And Tegan's understandably freaking out of this. She's hyperventilating, and her eyes are bug-eyed wide, and she's silently screaming at me like, shoot him. You know, of course, I know better. because I've known Drest Levesque since I was 17, and I know that he's a twisted man, but he's not a stupid man. So he's not about to throw me a loaded gun in the middle of one of his emotional spasms. So I'm like, yeah, sure. And I toss it back to him, and I say, I've already told you, I am not in the mood for this. I am cold. I have got so much paperwork to do, so I'm not going to play one of these stupid games right now. And so he smiles at me, and then he pulls the trigger on Tegan, execution style. I literally watched the life leave her eyes. And then he started to bury us. I am flat on my back with what feels like at the time my chest being caved in by a cinder block of human trauma. I have got dirt in my eyes. I've got dirt in my mouth. I've got blood in my nose. So Tegan's body is still on top of me, and it's just a crumbled heap of duct tape and limbs and a face I literally couldn't stop staring at because we are face to face. So I am screaming at Drest Levesque at this point. I am screaming every insult that I can think of. I'm screaming every curse word, every slur in all three languages that we commonly share, even though technically speaking, we're not supposed to be speaking to them. And I don't know what it is because I was literally just throwing spaghetti at the wall in hope that something would stick. But something I said finally set him off, and it stopped. Like, everything stopped. The shoveling, the cackling, the gleeful sadism that is Drest Levesque's entire personality. He stops what he's doing, and he grabs me by the throat, and he rips me out of the grave, and he just starts screaming. But he's not screaming at me, he's just screaming at the sky like some kind of lunatic trying to access God's voicemail. And I just remember that when he finally did address me directly, he just kept screeching,
You don't remember, do you?
And I'm like, remember what? Because honestly, I remember every single little interaction that we have ever had from the very first moment that we ever met. So I have no idea to this very day what he was screaming about. But he didn't answer. Like, I asked him what he was screaming about, and he didn't answer. He just threw me back on the ground, and he starts kicking me in the ribs again. And that hurt a lot. And he's kicking me, and he's kicking me, and he's kicking me. And then suddenly, like, the oceans parted, and like divine intervention with a stun gun, Michelle McGrath. And I could not even process what I was seeing at first. I thought that I was hallucinating. I thought that I was seeing stars or angels or something stupid and poetic like that. But no, it was just Michelle tasering Drest Levesque in the spine while I laid on the ground in a crumbled, blood-soaked heap. And honestly, the next few minutes were a bit of a blur of just, there was a lot of movement and shouting and pain, and Michelle was everywhere. She was checking my pulse, and she was screaming into her radio, and she was handcuffing the twitching psycho who just tried to kill me again. And I don't remember doing it, but I remember feeling the shovel in my hand, like the weight of it, and I remember swinging it. And I do remember, regrettably, saying something really stupid, something that he had said earlier in the night, something like, "Stay still, I want to see how close I can get." And I remember the moment that the shovel made contact, and I remember the crunch and the sudden silence, and the moment where he just stopped kind of being a threat and was just a body. Not that he was dead. He wasn't dead. I don't even think he was unconscious. In fact, I'm pretty certain he wasn't unconscious. I am not that strong of a person. My arms are really, really weak. However, he did stop talking, and for that moment in time, that was more than good enough. It took 3 officers to get Drest Levesque into the back of the cruiser. Not that he was like struggling or trying to fight them. He just kind of laid there like a sack and made them carry him, and he was just smiling the entire time. I remember that he was smiling, kind of like the entire night had gone to plan. So the next thing that I know, I am in the back of an ambulance, and that is when the night goes from bad to worst. And you're probably thinking, like, Casey, a young girl has died. How could this night possibly get any worse? Well, let me tell you. In case you've forgotten, which is completely understandable given all the action, I am a doctor. This entire event took place behind the only hospital for about 450 kilometers. And so where are they taking me? Number 1. Number 2, our town did not and still does not to this day have an ambulance service. If you like get into a car crash here and it's not that serious, someone will drive their ute/pickup truck, wherever you're from, pick the right word, down to go pick you up and bring you to us. If it's more than, 1 or 2 people, they'll send the school bus out. And if it is a more serious thing, we will call up the Royal Flying Hospital Service and they will send an aeroplane down to come pick you up. So we have no need for an ambulance. The fact that I was in one that I have never seen in our town before was red flag number one, that something here was not right. Red flag number two was that while I'm in this ambulance, the paramedic who's taking care of me, he leans over and without asking any of the usual questions, like, are you on any medication? Are you allergic to anything? Hey, where does it hurt? Does it even hurt? He proceeds to shove pills down my throat like we're sharing Tic Tacs, without asking, without any form of triage whatsoever. And as expected, we do not go to the hospital considering the fact that we were already there to begin with. We instead pull up out the front of the police station like we are Uber Eats, delivering a heavily drugged burrito. So the paramedics, they take me out and they throw me into a wheelchair and hand me off to a couple of officers who I will affectionately call Buzzcut and Mustache. And this really pissed me off because this is a really small town, so obviously I know them personally, and I know for a fact that they are balls deep in murder conspiracies, but whatever, what can I do? So Buzzcut and Mustache, they wheel me into an interview room, which is completely bare other than a single metal table and 2 chairs. And they leave me in there alone for hours. Hours. Now, thankfully, whatever mystery drug they gave me was incredibly effective at making me not care about anything, so I was actually quite content to sit in there for hours. Partly because I cannot sit up straight without thinking that the walls are judging me, and nobody comes to check on me the entire time that I'm there. Nobody tells me anything that's going on, but again, I am high as a kite at this point, so I don't really care. So eventually morning comes around and the drugs start to wear off, and at some point a man comes into the room, and I have never seen him before, never seen him again since. All I remember is that he was really short and he was really chubby and he was shiny in all the wrong places. Kind of think of like Jason Alexander, but with a bad comb over. So he comes into the room and he sits in the chair across from me like it's a completely normal thing to do without introducing himself. And again, without introducing himself, he holds out his hand and, I shake it because I have manners. And as we're shaking hands, he says to me,
Good morning, Miss Escamilla. My name is Keith Common, and I will be your, if you can't afford an attorney today.
And because I'm charmingly naive, I ask him, why do I need an attorney? And he looks at me like I'm an idiot, and he goes,
Well, technically you don't need one, but trust me, it's a really good thing that I'm here, because the charges against you are pretty grim, but don't worry.
And I'm like, charges? What charges? So he grins at me like he's just told a child that Santa's not real, and he says,
At the moment, you're looking at attempted murder, but don't worry, I think that we can plead it down to misdemeanor assault.
And I was like, of who? And he goes,
Mr. Levesque.
So I tried to explain to him that Drest Levesque has just killed somebody in front of me. And then he tried to kill me, so I don't think anyone's going to hold it against me that I took a shovel to his face. Not even that, I don't think Drest Levesque, knowing him, would care that I took a shovel to his face. In fact, I think that he would probably be proud of me for doing so, which is what any sane person would do when faced with imminent shovel-worthy doom. Keith friggin' Common, he just sits there, looking me in the eyes with a smile on his face, and then he goes, no. And I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean, no? He proceeds to blow a raspberry at me, and I mean, he actually blew a raspberry like this was Saturday morning TV. And then he goes off on this little tirade about how, they want to make an example out of me, and there's too much vigilante justice going around these parts lately. It's too trendy, and I'm the perfect poster child, and there is a very slim chance that we could use the self-defense angle, and that's only if the evidence all lined up, and hey, what do you look at that? The evidence is less than ideal. So he tells me there's no body, there's no evidence, the crime scene's been picked clean, and according to the official record of the event, there was just me and Dress there alone. So he reads to me the actual version of events, the official record of events that they're going with. According to the official record, Drest came to the hospital in the middle of the night to apologize to me for a previous misunderstanding. I naturally overreacted and pulled an unregistered gun out on him and forced him out of the clinic. He begged for his life and I lost control. I nearly killed the unarmed man and likely would have finished the job had it not been for the timely arrival of Deputy Michelle McGrath, who, according to their events, going off their events, one can only assume moonlights as a one-woman SWAT team. There was no murder, there was no threats, just poor misunderstood Drest Levesque crying and begging for mercy in the corner like some kind of Lifetime movie character. Now, there is a very small part of me that actually admires the creativity of it. Like, it is a very bold move to try to gaslight someone with paperwork. But good old Keith Common, he was not finished yet. He had come with props. One by one, he slid them across the table to me. All post-dated, by the way. All written with that same smug air of finality. First of all, there was Michelle's official report blaming me. Then there was the forensic report confirming my fingerprints on the unregistered gun. Talk screen showing that I was more loaded up than a sophomore on spring break. One of the deputy's summaries of my interrogation where I said way too much despite being told multiple times that what I said would and could be used in court. And my personal favourite, a psychological profile diagnosing me with conduct disorder and a knack for psychological detachment. Now, obviously all these things were fake because I had done nothing that entire night than sit in that room, high as a kite off my face, and I had not spoken to a single person. And I told him all this. I said, this is all fake, not to mention, these are all post-dated. And he's like, no, that's not true. Like, Michelle's was written today. I'm like, that's not the big problem here. So he sits back in his chair and he's looking me up and down with a very, intense look on his face, like he's trying to think hard. And then he finally goes,
If you don't like the idea of this, there is a second option that we can try.
And the paper parade started again, and he slid me my new statement, which Keith took a lot of pride in informing me that he had taken the liberty of writing in my stead, which I don't think this is how these things are supposed to work. According to this new statement that Keith had written, Drest had come and visited me at the hospital while I was alone, and this is about where the accuracy ends. He held me at gunpoint while he confessed to the murders of 2 people. I don't remember the names. I had never heard them before in my life, and I have not heard them since. It was something like Robert Munch, and I don't know. It doesn't matter. It's been how many years? Never heard of them again. So he confessed to the murders of 2 people, and then he forces me out the back where he had already dug a shallow grave with the intention of burying me alive. Luckily, Michelle showed up just in time to tase Drest, subduing him with her baton while I stopped in the corner. There was no mention of Tegan. I tell Keith, I'm like, look, this is also garbage. This is no more true than the last one.
Try not to think of it in terms of true and false. Your statement is just a formality so that the prosecution can move forward with their case against Drest Levesque. And we just made a few small adjustments for simplicity's sake.
For example, he explained that me digging the grave was unbelievable, that my physical limitations made it implausible, and that it didn't test well with the audience. And it was like, that really annoyed me, because digging that grave was really, really hard work, and I did not want Drest Levesque to get the credit for it. I wanted the medal for it. And it was like, more importantly, I was like, who are these 2 men that you're saying that Drest murdered? And Keith Common, he looks at me like I just asked him for his Netflix password, and he's like,
Why do you care? What difference does it make? You, Drest Levesque is going to jail. You and McGrath, you get to leave as heroes. Everybody wins.
I'm like, well, no, not everybody does win. What about Tegan? Apparently they were just planning on never mentioning Tegan again. They were going to let her go on indefinitely as a missing persons case, and I was not okay with this, and I told him that. And he sits back like he's super offended by this, and he goes,
Well, Casey, if you're not satisfied with our super generous offer, there is an option C.
And he reaches into his briefcase and he pulls out this tiny little pistol and he puts it on the table between us. Kind of like it's the final piece of a jigsaw puzzle titled Hostile Negotiation. And he sits back again and he goes,
I was really hoping that it wouldn't come to this.
And I'm looking at him and I'm looking at the pistol. I'm like, why are you trying to give me another gun? This is how we ended up in this situation in the first place.
What? No, this isn't for you. I mean, yes, it is for you, but not in the way that you're thinking it is.
And I was so confused and he was becoming flustered. So he took off his glasses and he licked his handkerchief. And then he started wiping his eyeballs, full on ocular polishing. And then he's trying to explain it all, the gun's supposed to be symbolic, it's supposed to be intimidating. I'm like, wait, are you threatening to shoot me? He's like,
No, I'm not threatening anything. I'm just implying that if you don't cooperate with us, I could, pew pew pew.
And I was so confused. I was so confused at this point. Like, are you saying that option C is that you're going to, like, shoot me out of here? Because, like, I appreciate the sentiment behind that, but I'm actually not down to participate in that. He was so offended. He was like,
No, I'm saying that I might, shoot you, because you're not playing ball with us. And it's supposed to show you how serious this whole thing is, that we're willing to kill you to keep you quiet if we must. You're supposed to be intimidated.
So I was just like, look, let's just take plan C off the table, because I think it's a bit like a joke where if you have to explain it to someone, it's not really that funny. And besides, it was a bit like with the Drest Levesque situation, where I was not scared or intimidated by anything that he was saying because I knew beyond all fact that he wasn't going to kill me. It's kind of the same situation here, because at this point in time, it had been about 6 years that I'd been with my handlers, and if they were going to kill me within that time frame, like, they would have done it already. It would have already been done. So you coming in here with a pew-pew is not scary to me at all. In fact, him coming into the room with a bouquet of flowers probably would have intimidated me more, because then I would have thought that he was unhinged, and unhinged people are unpredictable. So he starts going off on a rant about how it's supposed to be intimidating and most people don't question it and blah, 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 blah. At some point during this rant, he starts mixing up our names. So he's calling himself Casey and me Keith. And I almost didn't correct him, but then I thought, you know what? If he's going to pretend to be my lawyer, he should at least get our names right. So I tell him, I'm like, look, I'm Casey, you're Keith. It's been 6 years at this point. You're obviously not my actual lawyer, which is fine. But if we're going to keep up this charade for whatever reason, I don't understand why, but can we at least make an effort to keep the name straight? So the next thing that he does is he slides me a check across the table for $10,000 made out to cash. And he tells me that apparently Drest Levesque has some outstanding warrants with Interpol, and someone was feeling generous. So if I just sign the statement, I could take the check. So I sat there and I stared at the check and I stared at the statement and I stared at the gun. And for a very brief moment there, for a second, I did consider it. I considered signing the statement and getting up and leaving the police station with $10,000 in my pocket. But then I figured, like, what am I going to do with $10,000? I cannot leave the country. Like, I do not have a passport. I can only travel outside of Australia with express permission from my handlers, because I travel on a different travel document. And something tells me that they're not about to give me one to go on a holiday in Europe for the next 2 months. So I don't need money for that. So what am I going to buy? Am I going to buy a Chanel handbag and put a giant target on my back for the rampant youth crime in our town? Like, so that they can come and break into my house a week later? No, thank you. Like, I already feel like a rose with the heart of the ocean necklace hidden in my house because I have a Dyson hairdryer. I do not need that kind of pressure in my life. So I tell Keith Common, like, there is nothing that I can buy with $10,000 that I can't currently buy with my salary. So it's of no use to me. However, you do currently have the entire town thinking that Nate murdered Tegan.
No, that wasn't us. That was...
So I was like, yeah, that does sound like something that Ronald would do, but honestly, it doesn't even matter anymore at this point, because you are the one taking responsibility for this mess, so you need to clean it up. So if you want me to sign the statement, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. But in return, I want two things. A, I want you to exonerate my bestie. And number two, I want you to return Tegan's body to her family so that they can bury her. Like, I don't care how you do it. I don't care what excuse you make for why there's a wound in her head. Like, just get it done and I will sign it. If we have an agreement with that, we can move forward. But yeah, that is what happened. It took a few weeks and Tegan unfortunately did get the Clinton family special, but everything went to plan in that regard. Her funeral was an absolute mess, but that is a completely different story, a completely different video that I don't think I'm ever going to film, because I am very thankful to whatever God you believe in that the video of it has never ended up online. But anyway, that is the story of Tegan and how things went down on that specific night. So as always, this is Casey signing off for the night. Stay safe out there, stay weird, and I don't know, don't eat the pomegranate seeds.